Hello, in this video I'm going to run through an installation of Fusion Client SDK Gateway and Media Broker onto a single host. I've already prepared the host and installed FAS, and you'll find how-to articles covering these on the CafeX support portal, support.cafex.com. This configuration is typical of a development POC type of a configuration. For a production install, and typically you'd be installing Fusion Client SDK Gateway onto a FAS cluster, which basically gives you high availability, and the media broker would go on to a separate host, and there could well be a pool of media brokers depending on the number of concurrent calls you need to handle. So as I mentioned, FAS is already installed and running. We're going to install any prerequisites, unpack the installer, edit the advanced installer properties file, then run the installer, verify that the web admin is operational, and then make a browser-to-browser call. So you'll see I've downloaded and copied the required installer files and put them into opt installers. There we are, and there you can see them. So we've got the Fusion Client Core SDK installer in a zip archive, which we'll need to unzip in a second. And we've also got the Media Broker native libraries, or the libraries required by Media Broker for the Linux platform. First things first, let's just check that FAS is in fact installed and running. We can do that with the service command, so service FAS status. And there you see it's running. That's fine. So the first steps are to satisfy any prerequisites that we have for Media Broker, and there are a few documented in the install documentation. I'm just going to run through the procedure for doing that here. The first prerequisite is Pango, so let's install that. Here, -y install Pango. And away we go, it's installed. The second one is libxv. And the third and final is libxml2. That's already installed, that's good. Okay. So now we can unpack the installer zip archive, edit the advanced installer properties file, and then run the installer. So let's unzip the archive into a folder, and we'll call it Fusion Client SDK, FCSDK. And cd into that folder, and you can see there's a number of files unpacked into there. We've got the installer, which is this jar file here, and then a couple of properties files. One for running an upgrade, one for running a quick install, and one for running an advanced install. Now I'm going to run the advanced install because it gives me more control over all of the properties. It's more typical of a production install. So let's edit the advanced properties file. And we'll run through the properties in here. So we don't need to change the installer type. We're running the advanced installer, and that's fine. So we need to accept the EULA. So just type yes, and then scoot down to general config. So that install path is fine for our purposes here. I'm installing as root, and root has read-write access to /opt. Now you may well be installing Fusion Client SDK as a non-root user. If you're doing that, you need to make sure that the install path that you select is read-write accessible by the user that you're choosing, the non-root user that you're choosing. So JDK path, I know that I've installed that using an RPM into user Java, and there's a soft link called latest, which I'm going to use. So scoot down now to the packs that we're going to install. So here we define exactly what we are going to install. I'm going to install everything, including the sample app, except for the presence proxies. Now in a production install, you're going to be installing either the gateway or the media broker. So the packs you choose will be slightly different there. So let's go to the end here and let's change that to sample app. Okay, so to configure Fusion Client SDK, you can use either the admin web interface or a command line interface. This basically tells the installer where to put the command line interface. OPT CafeX is absolutely fine. Okay, so now we need to specify where our application server is running, the master node of our application server, because the installer is going to want to deploy artifacts to that FAS cluster. So that's running on this host, which is 192.168.56.250. Okay, so we can leave the admin port and the admin user name and password as it is. I installed FAS with the defaults for those anyway, so that's fine. So we need to configure a control domain for the gateway such that any SIP that we generate gets captured by the application server and delivered to the applications. Now I know that because I've specified the sample app, I specified I'm going to install the sample app, that it's basically going to want to provision users with the domain example.com. So that's what I'm going to enter here. Typically in a production install, then you'll be provisioning users with your own domain. So you need to specify that there. So scoop down. We are installing the admin clients, the CLI and web UI, onto the same app server as the runtime, so we don't need to do anything here. And the same with the REST services. They're onto the same app server, so again, nothing need to be changed here. So the installer is going to create a user that you will need to log in as to the web UI and the CLI. I'm going to leave these as they are, but you can change these as you wish. And you can also change the password and add other users post install. That's all documented in the FAS admin guide. So we're installing Media Broker here. Again, that's fine. In a typical production install, you'd be doing this separately, but at this point I need to point the installer at the place where the location of the native libraries or the tarball containing the native libraries. I know that I unpacked the Fusion Client SDK installer into a folder called Fusion Client SDK. We're in that folder now, so our tarball is one level up. So okay, the installer will check certain aspects of the OS. When it's installing Media Broker, it'll basically check to see that IP tables is turned off and SE Linux is turned off and the prerequisites are satisfied. If any of those fail, then the installer will fail, but you could choose if you wish to ignore those at this point. I'm going to say yes to ignore. I know that there are no processes running here, so I'm just going to say no, and we should be okay. So we're going to install the Media Broker as the root user, so we'll leave that as it is, and that's the end of the properties. So, oops, let's get out of insert mode and save that. So now we need to run the installer. So that's command is java minus jar, then the name of the jar file, minus options, and then the name of the advanced install properties file. So that's done. No errors reported. So next steps would be to verify that the web admin is operational, and then we can go on to make a browser-to-browser call. So here's the admin UI. Note the URL. Note that your IP address will be different, but the rest should be the same. If you remember, we installed Fusion Client SDK with an admin user, name of admin, and a password of admin. So I'll just enter those here now. And we should be able to log in. And here you can see that we're logged in. So for Fusion Client SDK, we've got this gateway tab here, which allows us to administer all aspects of Fusion Client SDK. Now, there's none required here. I chose to install the sample app, and that will have configured everything for me. But in a production install, you might need to check this, specifically the media brokers. And I should have a media broker here, which is running on my server, and it is, and it's up and running. In a production install, typically that will be on a different host, and there may be more than one of them. So you'll need to pay attention to that. Now we can go on to make a browser-to-browser call. Now you notice I've got Chrome here, 2 instances side by side, and here's the URL for the sample application, Fusion-Web. So I know that the installer has installed or configured 2 users for me. One is 1001 and the password is 123. So I'll log on as 1001 and 123 there, and now I'll log on as 1002 and 123 here. There we go. And I can make a call from 1001 to 1002 just by dialing 1002. Dial 1002. You can see I'm receiving a call here. And we establish oh, a little bit of feedback there, but you can see how easy it is to get Fusion Client SDK up and running and make your first browser-to-browser call. And that's it. I've been David Shutt. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.